the House Budget Committee, Republican Tom Cole of Oklahoma. First and foremost, Congressman, happy birthday to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you with us this afternoon. I mean, let's hit off with both of those issues. What is the likelihood that either or both do actually get passed this year?
I think on tax reform, it's very, very high. But the president put out his basic principles this week. Our own committee, the Ways and Means Committee under Kevin Brady, are literally meeting this weekend as they craft their version of it. But I think the president moving independently is also a good thing. I think it's a signal to Democrats that, hey, here's my opening position. I'm ready to deal in all different directions. Healthcare is trickier. We're close. Obviously, the discussions between Representative MacArthur and Representative Meadows moved us in the right direction. We had a lot more people coming on to vote for it. But today we needed to focus on making sure the government kept running, and we bought our negotiators enough time to finish that up next week. So today was all about doing first things first. We got that done. We should get an appropriations bill next week. Then we'll look at health care, and I think the tax issue obviously takes some time to work its way through legislatively, but I'm pretty optimistic about where we're going to go.
Well, one thing the administration and Congress needs to work through is how it's going to get paid for, whether it's going to increase the size of the deficit. Congressman, would you vote for this plan if it does increase the size of the deficit and is not revenue neutral?
Well, it depends on whether or not I thought within a reasonable period it would generate enough growth to begin to pay for itself. And so until you actually have legislative text in front of you and a CBO estimate about the real cost of it, it's pretty hard to commit to any specific thing. But look, we've been stumbling and bumbling along at 1.5% and 2% for a while. I think there's a broad consensus that we need to do some things that will spark economic growth, and I'm certainly prepared to run some risk to get that done.
Congressman, there's broad consensus that things need to be done. Of course, also, no one wanted to get as close to a shutdown as we did get. Does that worry you about things moving forward, that a Republican Congress couldn't get these things sorted much more simply and quickly?
No, actually, in terms of running the government, we could have done it last November and December, and we were pretty much there then. The decision was made to give the president an opportunity to put his stamp on things, and he's going to have some victories. When we actually passed the bill, he wanted more defense spending. He's going to get that. He wanted more spending on border security. He's certainly going to get some of that, not everything he wanted, but some. And there'll be some other items that the two parties worked on together, health insurance for minors, for instance. I think that will be in here. So we've used that time pretty productively, but no doubt about it. In my view, it should have gotten done back in November and December. Then we could have addressed these other issues with a supplemental appropriation. But again, if you leave the Appropriation Committee alone, it will actually get its work done.
Well, isn't the point that it only has another week? I mean, what passed today was only punting this by 1 week to avert a government shutdown.
All the negotiations have been going on since late last year. They were actually suspended to allow time to focus on health care and get the tax thing off going. So we're not very far apart. These bills are basically done. There's 2 or 3 last-minute items to do. But again, I don't believe in gambling with the family jewels, so to speak. So I think we should have done it earlier, but it's going to get done now, and there'll be some significant victories for the president. But there'll also be a lot of bipartisan compromise in it. That's the way appropriations work.
Congressman, in an interview with Reuters, President Trump seemed to suggest that he expected this job to be a little bit easier than it's turned out. What's your take on his first 100 days?
You know, I'm pretty pleased, honestly. I do think there's an awfully steep learning curve for anybody in the presidency of the United States. There's no other job like it. But he had some big wins in terms of getting Judge Gorsuch concerned in the Supreme Court. We've passed 29 pieces of legislation, more than any other opening term since 1949. Some of that is really significant from a business standpoint. The deregulatory stuff has saved American consumers and businesses over $67 billion. That's just what Congress has done through congressional review acts. The president's done more on top of that through executive orders. Finally, I think he's put together a really excellent national security team that I think even his critics acknowledge is probably as good as any new president has ever presented to the American people. So the one big disappointment was health care. And to be fair to the president, That wasn't his fault. The Republican conference has to take responsibility for that, not our leadership, but our members simply weren't able to put aside differences and come together.
Yeah.
I think we've made progress on that, but we still got a ways to go.
One more specific one, since you are on the Appropriations Committee and in charge of partly this funding issue. You know, the White House said it would fund Obamacare payments to insurers in the near term, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen there in the long term. The president has called it a bailout. You've said that you'd find the money. What's going to end up happening here?
They're going to be certainly in the immediate future funded. Look, the Republican bill, which hasn't yet passed, still calls for those subsidies to be paid over a 2 to 3 year period during a transition. The president himself and the speaker both said they did not want to pull the rug out from under people. But again, they've been being paid without going through the appropriations process. So the decision was made, and I think it was a good one. Look, our members don't support Obamacare. We're not going to ask them to vote to sustain it, but we are going to work with the president and make sure these companies aren't penalized for operating in good faith and make sure that people that have insurance don't lose it.
Congressman, thank you very much for joining us, and have a very lovely birthday weekend.
I will.
Congressman Tom.